Hello, welcome to This Week in Politics. Well, this week has been a busy week, and today we're going to discuss three of the major topics that happened: um, taxes, net neutrality, and the election down in Alabama. The one I want to concentrate the most time on is the new tax reform, and I use those air quoting marks, tax reform. I don't think it's really tax reform. Um, More than it is tax adjustments. But the high spots, um, in my opinion, there are really just two serious uh, and awesome things that have happened with this new tax reform bill. Now, it has not been passed as we sit here and talk. Everybody is expecting it to go and be voted on in the next couple of days. It's come out of committee. All the Republicans agree on it, and it will happen. And as it stands right now, the two major things that have happened is the corporate tax rate will go from 35 to 21%. It does not make us the most favorable tax bracket in the world, but it puts us in competition. And I do think it's enough that it'll bring a lot of our corporations back home. And I don't know the specifics if they have a repatriation on there for bringing their money back. If it is, there's trillions of dollars that can be brought back into our country from overseas. But the corporate rate is the one that is, but to me, equally as important is they're getting rid of the deductions for the sales tax rebate. Now, why is that important? Because a lot of states don't have sales tax. But for all of the blue states that tax their people to death, like the state I live in, Illinois, and California, and New York, and Florida, and all the New England states. See, what the Democrats have done in those states is they have raised and taxed their people to death on the state sales tax and told them you can turn around and deduct that off of your federal income tax. Therefore, the federal ends up picking up anywhere from 20 to 35% of the state's tax bill, which has always been wrong. That is a feature that was done to benefit Democratic states only, so that they can raise taxes in their own states. Well, Trump's getting rid of that, and I think that's awesome. I think if the state wants to raise their taxes, then they need to pay the consequences for raising their taxes. You know, go to the people and say, we raised your taxes. Don't go to the people and say, we raised your taxes, but you're going to get it back. That is wrong, in my opinion, and the Republicans are fixing that as well they should. Now, here's the rub. All of those states that's going to hurt aren't going to vote for Trump. But guess what? They didn't vote for Trump the first time. He didn't carry New York or California or many of the New England states. So it's not going to hurt him. It's not going to hurt the Republicans. Those are blue states, and the blue states are going to have to deal with them, as well they should. So the corporate rate from 35 to 21%. Now, as far as the readjustment, there was an article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and this was yesterday's paper, Saturday's paper. And on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, there is an article called GOP Poised to Pass Tax Overhaul. And then on the front of it, there is a chart there that explains the different brackets. The new tax chart will go from 7 brackets to 3 brackets. At least that's what we were told. The chart on the front of the Wall Street Journal has the same amount of brackets. I'm not sure which one to believe. But as I go through here and I look, and this is why I said at the beginning, I call this a tax readjustment, not an overhaul or reform. As an example, uh, unmarried individuals on the old plan, up to $9,525 will pay 10%. Under the new plan, up to $9,525 will pay 10%. No change. From 9,500 to 38,000, under the new plan will be 12%. Under the old plan, it was 15%. From 38,000 to 82,000, under the new plan will be 22%, used to be 25%. Under the new plan, 82,000 to 157,000 will be 24%, used to be 28%. Under the new plan, 157 to 200,000 will be 32%, used to be 33%. And the top bracket, now see, and here's the thing that irritates the fire out of me about Democrats. It doesn't matter what plan would have come forth. They did the same every time they go to cut taxes. The Democrats pull out the same old worn out lines. This is a tax cut for the rich, and it's going to hurt the middle class. There is no place on that chart that I just read from 0 to 180 some $1,000. There's nobody on that chart that is worse off. They are all better off. Now it's only a couple of percentage points. And here's another thing you will notice. I heard this morning on the radio. It said this is a big tax break for the rich and the wealthy. For people in this tax bracket, they will make an additional $35,000. That may be, but when you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, 35,000 is the same percentage as $100 is for somebody who makes 10,000. Okay, they're playing games with the numbers. There's nobody on this whole chart who does worse off. Everybody on the chart does better off. Now, on the very top bracket, all right, and that's over $426,700. Under the old rate was 39.6%. Under the new rate, 37%. I don't, it's the same, it's 2 percentage points difference there, and it's 3 percentage points difference when you're talking about the bottom of the bracket, where it's 9,500 to 38,700. New versus old, it's a 3-point switch, and at the very top of the bracket, it's 2.6%. So the bottom is, percentage-wise, the bottom is getting a better deal than the top percentage. I mean, the same old worn-out lines that they used in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and here we are with another tax cut, and all the same old dinosaurs in the Democratic Party are pulling out the same old historic lines that are absolutely false. Before they even knew what the numbers were, those Democrats came out and started preaching that this was a tax cut for the rich and the wealthy. Absolutely untrue. And the proof is in the numbers. And if you want to look at them, like I said, it's in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday's paper, December 16th. It's a good article. It gives good information, and it goes into great detail about the brackets, the amounts, the old versus the new. Now, everybody, like I said, everybody in the country will pay less taxes. This plan, as I see it, is pro-growth. And it's going to do it in several ways. Number one, it's going to put a couple of percentage points more money in everybody's pocket. Okay? That's a good thing. It's going to make the United States, see, right now we have probably the highest corporate tax rate in the world. So these large corporations, why would they pay 39.6% here when they can go to Europe and pay 12%? Why would they do that? I understand that perfectly. So what this does is it says, okay, we're not going to be the lowest, but we're going to be one of the lowest. So you American companies, bring your American businesses back to this country. And it's telling the rest of the world, if you're in a country where you're paying a lot more taxes than that, come to our country. That's the pro-growth part. 2. And the third pro-growth part is going to be hard. The Democrats don't see this yet, or if they do, they're not acknowledging it. Blue states start not being able to deduct that sales tax from their federal. It's going to force those blue states to do some things. They're either going to have to cut the sales tax in those countries or in those states. And when they cut the sales tax, that'll put more money in the people's pockets, which will do the same thing as a tax cut. So this plan has taken all three, the individual, the corporate, and the state tax, and has geared it all towards growth. If this passes as is, this economy is going to go crazy because there's no reason in the world to hold anything back from here. Just in the last 10 months, since Trump has been in office, with his pro-growth rhetoric and the tax bill coming, up to this point, the stock market has created $6 trillion in new wealth. Think about that, 6 trillion. When Trump took office, the stock market was around 19,000. It had not busted 20,000 and hovered there for a long time. In the last 10, 11 months, it is now up over 24,000 and it's scaring 25,000. $6 trillion in new wealth in the stock market. Now, people are asking if that is a bubble, and it might be a little bit, but based on the numbers, based on the economy, based on the growth, I think it's still a bull market, and I think it's going to be for at least another year or two, depending on some things, but based strictly on the logic of the market, I think it's all good, and this legislation is going to make things happen. Another thing that this does is it cuts the inheritance tax. Now, I have never understood this tax. If you work your whole life and you have $1 million to leave to your one child, when you die, as it stands, he doesn't get the $1 million. The government, well, before Reagan cut his, the government got 70% of that. So the government got 700,000 and your kid got 300,000. Reagan cut that to 40, I believe. And I think this gets rid of it. Now, if you work your whole life and save $1 million to pass down to your kid, what logic could you possibly have for the government taking any of it? The government have nothing to do with you saving the money, nothing. And yet somehow they feel like an inheritance tax is something they should get their fingers on. It was just another Democratic way to get their hands on your money, and they called it something that sounded good. So they're getting rid of it. That's going to help too. As I pointed out earlier in the when we were going over the chart, even the ultra wealthy are going to pay more taxes. Everybody seems to forget the United States government is a lot like your local church. And anybody that knows anything about church giving knows this. 10% of the people pay 95% of the tithes in a church. They do 95% of the work. Everybody has anything to do with churches knows that's true. It's the same with the federal government. The top 10% of the wage earners in this country pay 90% of the taxes in this country. Everybody else pays the rest. And when I say the rest, 10%. So that means 90% of the US population pays 10% of the taxes. So when the Democrats say that it is a tax cut for the ultra wealthy and the American middle class gets nothing, well, that's not true. They're giving us 1 or 2%, which if you're only total paying 10% combined, 1 or 2% is quite a bit of cut. When you cut, and the difference is this: when the middle class gets 2% more of their money, they just spend it, which is good. It needs to be in the economy. That's good. When the wealthy get a cut of 1 or 2%, because their numbers are so much larger, they reinvest that money into their business. Not all of it, but some of it. So that's where the wealth is created in the economy. The wealth is not going to be created from the bottom up. The wealth is going to be created at the top because they're going to take their money and they will spend some of it on themselves. But history has always shown that people that make money invest money. And when they get money, they invest money. This is a pro-growth plan. It has covered just about every area that you could possibly cover to have a pro-growth agenda. Now, there was some standouts, some things that happened along the way here, and I want to draw those out. And I'm not happy to say this because I liked Lil Marco. When he was running for president, I liked him. I did not like his stand on immigration, but I thought, was a basic conservative. We have a 2-vote margin in the Senate, and with McCain fighting for his life, it's doubtful he'll be there for the vote. But if he is, good. But Marco Rubio came out this week and he said he's not going to vote for the plan unless the child tax credit gets increased. Now, understandably, we all know what he's doing. He's preparing his agenda so that he can make another run for the president either in 2020 or 2024. But this is how I feel about that. You are putting your personal ambition ahead of the good of the country as a Republican. And I find that despicable. The child tax credit right now is $1,000. He wanted it to go to $2,000, and he wanted to raise the new corporate limit from 21 to 22%. Is it doable? Probably. And he did get it increased. The amounts are not what the problem is, because this change was already brought up before the Senate. It was a bill that stood on its own. He introduced it. They voted on it. They voted it down. The Senate did not want to do that. And he lost, not along party lines, but he lost 70 to 30. So now, having not been able to get it passed that way, now he wants to sneak it into the budget and use his vote as ransom to get it done. I find that despicable. That's the way Democrats do stuff. The last I heard, they did not raise the corporate taxes. It stayed at 21%, but they raised the child tax credit to $1,400. That's the last I heard, anyway. Now, I understand how politics works. I understand getting yourself in line for another run. But when you put your personal ambition in front of a pro-growth, Republican-backed tax plan, and you hold it and your vote as hostage to get what you want to prepare your ambition, I find that despicable. So here's what I think needs to happen. I think Steve Bannon needs to go down to Florida and find a good Tea Party candidate that has a better stand on immigration and has a good, strong, firm grasp of conservative beliefs, and run him against little Marco. I think he must go. When, after we lost the seat in Alabama that we're going to talk about, our vote total now is down to 1. And when you've got Murkowski and Flake and Corker, and we cannot afford to have, we need to get rid of all the ones that are going to stand in line for whatever their cause is, to put their personal beliefs in front of what's best for the country. A pro-growth tax-cutting agenda is what's best for the country. We as conservatives believe that. Democrats don't believe that. They believe more government, more taxes, bigger government, more programs, more funding. That's what's best for them. But the American people voted the Republicans in. And what the American people are saying is the programs and the money and the bigger government isn't getting it done. This is the Republican agenda, and it has been for many, many years. And if you can't get in line with that, you need to go. That's what Steve Bannon is doing. He's getting rid of all the establishment liberal Republicans, or trying to. And that's what needs to happen with Lil Marco. Now, I want to talk about the tax issue magnified some issues that we have with the Congress. We as the American people have with the Congress. And here's the big one that everybody knows. We have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And in their first year, can you name one piece of legislation that they got done through Trump's agenda? One. No. The big one that they started with was to repeal and replace Obamacare. And this was the major issue, one of the major reasons I did not vote for Trump. I don't want Obamacare replaced. I want it eliminated. Period. Let the market decide, not the government. But they couldn't even get that done. Now, the only reason that this tax bill is getting passed is this. These senators understand that if they don't get some legislation done on Trump's agenda, they will be done in 2018, because the American people are going to say, hey, we gave it to you and you got nothing. You got nothing. So they understand that they have to get something done, and this was the one on the agenda that's going to get done. The year is running out. I mean, they're running down to the wire. This is the last week coming up that they have to get this done and on the president's desk. And that's what Trump had asked for, and it looks like they're going to deliver. And by the way, a side benefit in this tax plan is they did put in repealing the mandate for Obamacare, which in effect will kill Obamacare, which is good. They're going to get 2 pieces of legislation done in one, and I think it's awesome. But the problem that the American people have, one of the problems, is it's been a do-nothing Congress. The second part is the American people still do not understand totally and completely that the Republican and Democratic Party as we know it is dead. As we have grown to know Republican and Democrats. There are still two parties, but it's establishment and Tea Party. And let me give you just an example. We're going to go into it in detail in a little while. The Senate seat that was just voted on down in Alabama. Tea Party was Roy Moore. Establishment was Jones. He was a Democrat, but he was establishment. Now, how do I know that? Because the Republican Party pulled their financing for Roy Moore. The establishment, and by the way, Flake, the Republican from Alabama, wrote a check to the Democrat down there. The Republican Party did not supply him with get out the vote people. They allowed the Democrats to outfund them 14 million to 1. 14 to 1. They outspent and allowed the Democrats to outspend Roy Moore. The establishment, not the Democrats, not the Republicans. And if you look at the Republicans that they interviewed during this, they did everything but endorse Jones down there in that race. Mitch McConnell said, well, as soon as he gets here, he's going to face an ethics, go to the ethics committee. So what's he telling the people in Alabama? If you vote for this guy, he's going to be ineffective because he's going to be under an ethics investigation. Send Jones up here and no problem. And that was the Republicans telling him that. But if you go through and look at the names, it's all establishment Republicans. It doesn't matter to them, Republican or Democrat. What matters is, are they in for the establishment? And if they are, they'll take them. And Jones is. So there's too many establishment Republicans. And the ones that are there currently that I think we need to get rid of. One is Bob Corker, and he's gone. Lil Marco, I talked about him. Murkowski from Alaska. And I would love to see Sarah Palin take that race on. John McCain, who is currently, as I understand it, fighting for his life. And nobody wants to see him go out that way. But here's the good news. If he does pass away before his term is up, there's a Republican governor out there that will have the ability to appoint a senator in his place. Bob Lee, and the female from Maine, who is really a Democrat. She's a Republican in name only, Rhino. And there's many more, but these are the ones that I think we have to get rid of. So you think about that. If we get rid of these 6, bring in 6 Tea Party that are not going to hold their votes captive, these are 6 solid votes that we'll be able to have. Instead of going from 6 wobbly Republican votes, depending on what the topic is, we'll have 6 strong yes votes anytime we want to get things done. And by the way, the vote on the legislation in the House and in the Senate for the tax bill. And for all of you liberals and so-called independents, I want you to think about this. Not one of them, not one Democrat voted to cut your taxes. Not one. Think about that next time you go into the voting booth. Not one Democrat voted to lower your taxes. I said earlier about this has been a do-nothing Congress. With Obamacare, they couldn't get that done. We got basically none of Trump's agenda through in legislation. And here's what I think should be being done right now. Somebody somewhere needs to have a stair step of things to get done when they come back. You know, like I would have a 5-pronged plan to happen in the next year, and I'd have it spaced out. You know, we control this right now. So, A, funding the wall. Let's do that the first thing. Fund the wall, appropriate the money, and boom, be done with it. Number two, let's get the judgeships filled. Stop pussyfooting on that bitch McConnell, and let's get these through. But it seems like they wait until they get one done, like this one here with the tax reform. They wait till they get this done, and then they spend the next 3 months figuring out what the next thing they want to do is, and then it takes another year to get the legislation together and have a debate. So to get one thing done, it's going to take a year and a half. That is not the way you govern. You make a list of the things you want done, and you put a priority on them. Then you figure out exactly what it is you want in each bill. Then you set a schedule for voting on it, and you get it done. They've spent a whole year trying to get this tax thing done, and they knew Trump won back in last November. I did a show several years ago where I said, just on the judgeships alone, the Republican National Committee should have at that time, and by the way, Judicial Watch did do this, and thank God for them. They have put together an outstanding list of ultra-conservative young judges. But how wrong is it that they had to do it? The Republicans should have been doing this all along instead of relying on somebody else. So that as soon as he came in, they should be voting on those, boom, 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 boom. They should all be done by now. Now, Trump is moving quickly, but it's in spite of bitch McConnell. He is slow walking those through there. And why he's doing that is beyond me, except for the fact that he is establishment. The only way he is getting things done is Trump is pulling and dragging and kicking him along to get things done. You would think that as a Republican Speaker of the House that has, or the Senate Majority Leader, you would think that he would be jumping up and down trying to get as much legislation through as he could. I mean, for God's sakes, he's had 4 or 5 years as leader to get in there and get these things done, at least on paper. Hasn't happened. Now, since Roy Moore has lost down in Alabama, if they do not get these taxes done this week, it's not going to get done. And this will be a year of legislative failure for the Republican Party, and they will deserve that label, failure. Well, that's basically what I wanted to talk about with the new tax reform. Now, on each program, I like to, at the end, do current events. And this week on current events, I'm not just going to mention them and do a little blurb on them. I want to talk a little bit more about each one because both of these are really important. The first one I want to talk about is the Roy Moore lost to that liberal Democrat, Jones, down in Alabama. Roy Moore lost by 21,000 votes, which sounds like a lot, but it's 1 or 2 percentage points. Those 1 or 2 percentage points, let's talk about that. There are a couple of things that happened, and this will happen in the congressional elections coming up in 2018, and I hope the Republicans or the Tea Party was paying attention. The blacks in Alabama voted in percentages higher than when Hillary or Obama ran down there. Think about that. How did that happen? Why did that happen? It was because of all of the money that came in from California, New York, and the Democratic National Committee. Remember I said they outspent him 14-1. What they did is they got out a massive get out the vote. They took vans and buses onto the black neighborhoods and carted them. Now, I also have seen some reports and pictures of people being bussed in from out of state to vote. Can't prove that. I can't wait to see somebody do a report on a breakdown county by county of how many registered voters there were and how many votes were cast. In a lot of the blue states, California, Illinois, New York, there were, in Illinois, if I remember right, there was over 20 counties where the actual votes casted were more than the number of registered voters in that county, which means fraud, blatant fraud. And I'd like to see those numbers from down in Alabama. They're probably not going to do it. But they spent all of that money on getting the vote out. That was the first thing. The second thing, the Republican Party. They cut him off at a crucial part. They stopped funding him, stopped backing him. There's a Republican and a Democrat in the race. The Republican National Committee stopped financing the Republican. I don't care what your personal view is. This is about governing the country. We have to have, the function of the Republican National Committee is to fund Republicans. That's its function. They refused to down there until it was too little, too late at the end. So the Republican National Committee was back and forth. First they endorsed him, then they pulled their endorsement, then they financed him, then they pulled the financing, and then at the last minute, I mean, like within the last week, they started funding him again, but not fully. At the crucial part where Roy Moore should have been working on getting out the vote, he had no money to do that. So he was at a distinct disadvantage, and he was put there by the Republicans. That's why I know that the Republican National Committee is run by establishment, which, by the way, I want to take this opportunity to say, for those who are Republicans, for those who are Tea Parties, do not send your donations to the Republican National Committee, period. They are using that money to finance establishment, not Republican, but establishment politicians, which is the swamp. When we talk about drain the swamp, these are the people that are in the swamp, the establishment, and the Republican National Committee is financing those people. So don't send your money there. Find good Tea Party candidates and send your money directly there. Now, I know that you can donate more money. Find more candidates. Contact Steve Bannon and find out what you can do through him. And for those of you that have a lot of money to invest, again, find good conservative candidates, not establishment. And if you still have money you want to donate after you've reached the limit, contact people like Steve Bannon or Judicial Watch or any good conservative organization, nonprofit organization, and ask them what you can do. But do not, under any circumstances, send your money to the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee. They're using that only to perpetuate the swamp. As I said earlier, Mitch McConnell was at least partially responsible because he told the people of Alabama, if you vote Roy Moore in and send him to Washington, and well, first he said, we're not going to seat him, which has only been done one time in our history, and it was right after the Civil War, and they said he was a traitor. So it's never been done. So once that was pointed out, Mitch McConnell backed up and he said, well, we'll seat him, but he's almost surely going to have an ethics committee look into him. So what he was telling the people of Alabama is, if you send Roy Moore up here, a conservative Republican, he's going to come up here marked and may lose his seat if he's found guilty, and your vote won't mean anything. So Mitch McConnell is responsible. He also said that the women in the Senate would decide. Well, they said that about the Democrats. The women came out and said basically what they said is accusations equals guilt. So what he was saying, in effect, to the people of Alabama is if we let the women in the Senate decide what needs to happen, the women are going to tell him to leave. Again, negating your vote in Alabama uh, so that your vote means nothing. So the people in Alabama were faced with not only is Roy Moore guilty or not guilty, but is my vote going to count? Even if I believe in Roy Moore, is my vote going to count? So as you can see, Roy Moore had just about everything thrown against him, and he almost won. Now, it was a sound Republican state, and he should have won. Now, here's what I have been saying all along, and I've said this forever, and this is biblical, okay? I'm pretty sure that now that the election is done, these women that accused him are going to fade into the background, and we're never going to hear or see from them again, okay? If that happens, that tells me it was all lies. And it was all manipulating to get him to lose. And those women are responsible primarily for his loss. If, however, Roy Moore sues them or pursues them, that's going to tell me that it was not true and he's going to make it right. Now, if that happens and those women are found guilty, they should get the same punishment that Roy Moore would have gotten if he were found guilty of whatever they accused him of. As an example, if that 14-year-old girl, I mean, at the time she was 14, if it's found that he did what she said he did, and he would have gotten 20 years in prison, and it turns out that he wasn't guilty, then that woman needs to get 20 years in prison. Now, you say, well, that's awful mean. No. Careers are being destroyed. People's lives are being destroyed. Their reputations are being destroyed by these women lying. There is nothing at all wrong with holding them to the same amount of accountability. And I'll tell you what that'll do. That'll stop all this bull from these women coming out and throwing accusations around. On Friday of this week, it was made known. Now, the attorney that was handling that woman's case with Roy Moore has a daughter who is also an attorney. That daughter was put out notices that if you are willing to come forward and publicly make accusations against Donald Trump, we will pay you up to $750,000. How is that even right? How is that legal? What needs to happen is somebody come out and say, if you make an accusation against anybody and it's found to be not true or not provable, you're going to get 20 years in prison. That'll knock that stuff out right now. Now, am I saying that what they are saying is not true? Absolutely not. And by the way, for most of those cases, I'm guessing the statute of limitations is worn out anyway. So this is not about going after him legally. There was never anything about that. The statute of limitations is done. There's nothing they can do to Roy Moore. Okay? This was all about politics. It was all about smear. It was all about destroying Roy Moore, and they did. They need to be held accountable. You cannot allow that to happen. That is wrong. What if that was you? What if one of your employees made an accusation and destroyed your life, destroyed your reputation, destroyed your marriage? It's not so funny when it's up close and personal. Those women need to be held accountable. So, post-mortem, Roy Moore almost won, even with the entire deck stacked against him. All the lies, all the destruction, all of the lack of financing, all of the money from California and New York, all of the intimidation, all of it, and he almost won. So life without a Republican from Alabama. Now this Jones is not going to be reelected in 2018. So we need to go back down there. We need to find a Tea Party Republican and let's get behind him and send your money to that candidate directly, not to the Republican National Committee, not to the Alabama National Republican. Send it to either the Tea Party or to the candidate themselves. And let's take that seat back in 2018. Now, the other issue I wanted to talk about was net neutrality. Now, there are some legislation that are purposely named incorrectly. Let me give you an example. Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. It was neither affordable, it was not about care, and it was not an act. So that whole title was wrong. It was the title of that should have been Wealth Redistribution Plan, or the plan for the government to control 1/3 of our economy, or step 2 to single pay health insurance. But what it should not have been called is Affordable Care Act. Now, we have another one here called net neutrality. And what they're talking about is the worldwide net. And the title says net neutrality. So what they're saying is everybody's equal. You can't, and what Americans believe that means is you can't charge one person more than the other just to give them wider access. That is not what this act is about at all. It has nothing to do with that. Here's what this act has to do with. It was brought in under the Obama administration, and we've had it now for 2 years. And it takes the web out. See, before net neutrality, the web was a free place of exchange of ideas and everything. It was free. There was no censoring. There was no rules. It was controlled by the people. The Obama administration says, oh, we can't allow that to happen because just like with the radio, we'll have too many conservatives, too many Republicans out smashing us, so we need to control that. And so they used this little thing called, I think it was called Title II, where it would take the web and it would classify it as a utility, like an electric company or a gas company. It would classify the web as a utility and therefore subject to government regulation. And the government regulation could be whatever they decided. Okay, now, I have been on a rampage for a couple of years against Zuckerberg, Facebook, Google, and Twitter because they are collectively trying to control the language on their social sites. And all three of those leaders are left-wing liberals. And I believe Zuckerberg is probably going to try to run for president. So between now and then, he wants to be able to absolutely shut down any dissent on Facebook. Now, he's already taken some steps, but he didn't have the cojones to take the heat. So what he said was, we'll set up some guidelines, we'll have some independent third-party people and give them the power to regulate on Facebook. First off, the whole concept is wrong. That free speech means free speech. It does not mean free speech unless Zuckerberg doesn't like it. Then we're going to control what you say. Free speech means free speech. If I want to get on here and say anything, I should have the right to do that and not be afraid of being quieted down. Now, let me give you an example of how this works. First off, the independent companies he had were all ultra left-wing companies, okay? There is one of my friends on Facebook he just posted a sentence, and it said something about um, Muslims wanting to kill Americans. Facebook put him in uh, Facebook jail for 30 days, shut his account down. He had no access for 30 days. When he appealed it, he sent them a link to a website that showed two men engaging in homosexual sex on camera on Facebook. Facebook sent him back a letter and said, "We received your letter. This does not violate our standards." So, from the left wing's point of view, two men engaging in homosexual sex uh, on Facebook does not violate their standards, but restating a fact that Muslims will tell you their goal is to kill Americans. That violates their standards. That is the danger of what Zuckerberg and Google and Twitter are doing. We are taking it out of the realm of the market and putting it into the hands of somebody else who's going to control our free speech. That's what net neutrality was all about. It is imperative, and they did. They voted to get rid of net neutrality. And every article I've seen, every pundit I have listened to that is not right wing have all said the same thing, that it's all about neutrality, and Trump got rid of neutrality, and now people are going to be able to splurge ahead. Well, let me remind you of something. The market always wins. The market will decide who pays what. They are not going to cut their nose off to spite their face. Their goal is to make the most money they can. And since we, the people, are the dominant source of their income, they are not going to hurt us. The market won't allow that to happen. Remember that. This was never about neutrality of any type. This has always been about government control. This has always been about the regulation of the World Wide Web. We cannot allow that to happen. And Trump did the right thing. He pulled that regulation off of the World Wide Web, and we won a victory. Now, Zuckerberg, Google, and Twitter are doing an end round that. They are trying to get the Democrats in the House and the Senate to impose regulations on them so that the government will take the rap and not the independent companies. The Democrats, when they held hearings this last year, and the Democratic leadership feigned anger and told them, "You either regulate it or we will." That was the goal all along. They're not going to, those three are not going to regulate it, but they're hoping and praying that the government does. Remember, it is not about neutrality of anything. This is about control of the web, and we cannot allow that to happen. Well, that's what I want to talk about with these three subjects this week. I think next week we're going to have some huge news to talk about with the passage of the tax bill. That's going to be revolutionary, and the stock market will go crazy. If that passes this week, look for the stock market to go crazy, and look for an outstanding beginning to next year. I would expect the GDP growth to catapult up, I would expect a lot of movement to happen very quickly. This will be big. We continue on with our march for getting these establishment Republicans out of the House and Senate. We march on overturning all of the regulation that the Obama administration, the Democrats have put in. Trump continues to do an outstanding job. As I said at the beginning, I did not vote for Trump because I didn't trust him. I still don't trust him, but he has gone right down his list. The caveat that I gave to that when I did my shows, and I did not endorse him, what I said was, if he does everything he says he's going to do, I can support him. I just don't believe he's going to do that. Well, I was wrong. He is going down that list. And I think it's awesome. Now, the downside is that for the next year, the legislative part is probably not going to get done unless we can do a bipartisan thing, which is possible. We still need to get the infrastructure for this country done, and I think we can get Democrats behind that. So I look forward to that. But other than that, we're going to have to concentrate on getting rid of the establishment Republicans and take a couple of Democrat seats away from them in the 2018 elections. And we need to, so if you've got money and you want to donate, you want to see that happen, get a hold of Breitbart or Steve Bannon and donate to him and to the Tea Party candidates around the country. Well, that's all I really wanted to say. By the way, just one announcement. This program and all the programs that we do are underwritten by the Prayer Box Ministry. You can find us at www.prayerboxministry.org. That's O-R-G. If you'd like to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, go over there and check us out. It has been designed as an interactive website. There's a lot over there to do. You could go there every day for a year and not listen or watch everything that happens. So go over there, check us out. That's prayerboxministry.org. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about. I look forward to next week when we can sit down and talk about this week in politics.